You are holding a piece of meat. It is fresh. It has been cut from the animal within the past hour. It is still warm. The grain is visible. The fat is white and firm. The blood drips slowly onto the ground. You have no salt, no pepper, no garlic, no rosemary, no soy sauce, no spice from any continent, no marinade, no rub, no sauce of any kind. You have fire, you have a sharp stone, you have your hands, and you have this piece of meat. How do you make it taste good? This is the question that every ancient human answered 3 times a day for hundreds of thousands of years. They did not have a supermarket. They did not have a spice rack. They did not have a recipe book. They had meat, fire, and their own ingenuity, and they made it taste good. Not just edible, good. Good enough that they kept doing it, kept refining their techniques, kept passing their knowledge to their children. Good enough that the people who ate this food survived, reproduced, and eventually produced you. How? Let me start with a confession. You have been told that ancient food was bland, that your ancestors ate unseasoned, boring, tasteless meals because they had no options. This is wrong. It is a myth based on the assumption that flavor comes only from the chemistry of salt and spices. Flavor comes from technique, and ancient humans were masters of technique. Let me start with the most obvious technique. Fire itself changes the flavor of meat. When you put meat over a flame, several chemical reactions happen simultaneously. The heat causes the Maillard reaction, where amino acids and sugars in the meat combine to create hundreds of new flavor compounds. This is the same reaction that gives seared steak its complex, savory taste. This is the same reaction that makes grilled food taste different from boiled food. Ancient humans did not know the words Maillard reaction, but they knew the effect. Meat cooked over fire tastes different from raw meat. It tastes richer, deeper, more satisfying. The first time someone accidentally dropped meat into a fire and ate it afterward, they made a discovery that changed human evolution forever. Dr. Richard Wrangham at Harvard University argued in his 2009 book, Catching Fire, that cooking was the key to human evolution. Cooked food provides more calories than raw food. It requires less energy to digest. It allows the gut to shrink and the brain to grow. Wrangham's argument is primarily about nutrition, but the flavor implications run just as deep. Cooked meat tastes good. Good-tasting food encourages people to cook more. Cooking more provides more nutrition. The feedback loop between flavor and nutrition drove human evolution. But fire alone does not make meat delicious. The technique matters. Let me talk about the first and most important flavor-enhancing technique. Making fat. Fat is where flavor lives. A lean piece of meat, cooked over a fire, is dry and bland. A fatty piece of meat, cooked correctly, is rich, moist, and intensely satisfying. Ancient humans understood this instinctively. They prized fat above lean meat. Dr. John Speth at the University of Michigan has spent decades studying the role of fat in prehistoric diets. In his 2010 book, The Paleoanthropology and Archaeology of Big Game Hunting, Speth showed that ancient humans made deliberate choices about which animals to hunt based on fat content. They targeted young animals with high fat reserves. They targeted animals in the fall when fat stores were highest. They avoided lean animals even when they were easier to hunt. The reason is simple. Lean meat is not satisfying. It does not provide enough energy. It can even be dangerous because digesting lean protein without adequate fat can lead to protein poisoning, also known as rabbit starvation. Ancient humans needed fat to survive, and they needed fat to make meat taste good. So how did they get fat into their meat? They cooked it in ways that preserved and enhanced the natural fat. One technique is spit roasting. You impale the animal on a wooden spit and rotate it over a fire. The fat renders slowly, basting the meat as it turns. The outer layer crisps, the inner layers stay moist. The fat that drips into the fire creates bursts of flame that add a smoky, charred flavor. Another technique is roasting in the skin. You leave the animal's hide on during cooking. The hide traps steam and fat inside, creating a moist cooking environment that prevents the meat from drying out. When you peel the hide off after cooking, the meat is tender, juicy, and infused with its own fat. The Hadza of Tanzania use both techniques. When a Hadza hunter kills a small antelope, they often roast it whole on a spit, turning it slowly over the coals. The fat from the meat drips onto the fire, creating flames that crisp the surface. The result is a piece of meat that needs no seasoning because the flavor comes entirely from the animal itself. Let me talk about a technique that adds flavor through smoke. Smoking is not just about preservation. It is about flavor. When you hang meat above a smoldering fire, the smoke deposits chemical compounds called phenols and carbonyls onto the surface of the meat. These compounds create flavors that are impossible to achieve any other way. Smoky, woody, sweet, and pungent all at once. Ancient humans discovered smoking by accident. They hung meat near a fire to keep it away from predators and insects. The smoke that rose from the fire flavored the meat. When they ate it, they noticed it tasted different. Better, they started hanging meat near fires intentionally. Different woods produce different smoke flavors. Hardwoods like oak, hickory, and beech produce a sweet, mild smoke. Softwoods like pine and spruce produce a sharp, resinous smoke that can be overpowering. Ancient humans learned which woods produced the best flavors. They chose their smoking wood as carefully as a modern barbecue pit master chooses their wood chips. A 2007 study by Dr. Paul Silito at Durham University documented the smoking practices of indigenous peoples in Papua New Guinea. He found that these communities use specific wood species for smoking specific types of meat. The knowledge is precise. Certain woods are good for smoking wild pig, others are better for smoking cassowary. The same wood used for the wrong meat can ruin the flavor. Let me now talk about a technique that you probably do not associate with ancient cooking: fermentation. Fermentation is a controlled decomposition. Microorganisms break down proteins and fats in the meat, creating new flavor compounds. The result is a strong, complex, umami-rich taste that cannot be achieved by cooking alone. The Inuit of the Arctic have a traditional dish called kiviak. They take a whole seabird, place it inside a seal skin, seal it, and bury it under a rock for several months. The bird ferments. When it is dug up, it is eaten raw. The flavor is intense, pungent, and unlike anything in Western cuisine. This sounds extreme, but it is part of a global pattern. Fermented meat appears in traditional cuisines across the world. The Swedish surströmming, the Ethiopian kitfo, the Korean hungoho, the Icelandic hkarl, all are examples of intentionally fermented animal products. Ancient humans did not understand the microbiology of fermentation, but they understood the effect. Fermented meat tasted different. It lasted longer. It provided nutrients that fresh meat did not. The technique was refined over thousands of years. Now let me talk about the most obvious seasoning that ancient humans eventually discovered: salt. Salt is the only mineral that humans actively crave. Your body needs sodium to function. Your nerves require it. Your muscles require it. Your kidneys require it. The craving for salt is not a moral failing. It is a biological necessity. Ancient humans got salt from animal blood and meat. A diet of fresh meat provides enough sodium for basic survival, but the flavor of salted meat is dramatically different from unsalted meat. Salt amplifies the natural flavors of meat. It suppresses bitterness. It enhances sweetness. It changes the texture of proteins, making them more tender. The oldest evidence of intentional salt use comes from the site of Poiana Slatinei in Romania, where salt springs were exploited as early as 8,000 years ago. But the use of salt as a seasoning is probably much older. Salt is found in nature as rock salt deposits, salt springs, and seawater. If you lived near a salt source, you used it. Dr. Elaine Froment at Orstom documented salt use among modern hunter-gatherers. He found that groups living near salt sources use it regularly. Groups living far from salt sources do not use it at all. The difference is not cultural preference. It is geographic availability. Flavor is constrained by what the landscape provides. Let me now talk about herbs, wild plants that add flavor to meat. Long before humans cultivated gardens, they knew which wild plants made meat taste better. Garlic mustard, wild onion, wild garlic, juniper berries, fennel, thyme, rosemary, oregano. All of these grow wild in different parts of the world. All of them can be used to season meat. The Neanderthals at Shanidar Cave in Iraq used yarrow and chamomile. The early modern humans at Kimmerer Cave in Israel used wild cereals and legumes. The Paleolithic people of Wrangham Cave in Greece used lentils and almonds. These were not accidental inclusions. They were intentional additions to meals. In 2010, Dr. Karen Hardy at ICRA Barcelona analyzed the dental calculus of Neanderthals from several sites. She found microscopic residues of plants that have strong flavors and medicinal properties. These included yarrow, chamomile, and a relative of the mint family. Hardy argued that Neanderthals were not accidentally eating these plants. They were deliberately selecting them for flavor and health benefits. Think about what this means. Neanderthals, the supposedly brutish cave people, were using herbs to season their meat. They were combining ingredients to create flavor profiles. They were cooking with intention. Now let me talk about a flavor source that is almost invisible in the archaeological record: honey. Honey is the world's oldest sweetener. It has been used by humans for at least 10,000 years. But the relationship between humans and honey is probably much older. Wild honey is a high-energy food that requires skill and courage to harvest. The Hadza have a tradition of honey hunting. They follow a bird called the honey guide, which leads them to beehives. They smoke the bees, break open the hive, and take the honey. Honey is used as a meat seasoning in many traditional cuisines. It adds sweetness, complexity, and a glaze that caramelizes over fire. Honey-glazed meat, cooked over coals, is a flavor combination that predates recorded history. The Hadza do not just eat honey raw. They cook with it. They rub honey on meat before roasting it. The honey caramelizes, creating a sweet, smoky crust. The result is a flavor that rivals any modern barbecue sauce. And it requires only 2 ingredients: meat and honey, both found in nature. Now let me talk about a technique that is so simple you might not think of it as cooking: eating meat raw. Not all meat needs to be cooked to taste good. Fresh, raw meat has a clean mineral flavor that is entirely different from cooked meat. The Inuit eat raw frozen fish and raw whale skin. The Maasai drink raw blood mixed with milk. The Japanese eat raw fish as sashimi. The Ethiopian eat raw beef as kitfo. Raw meat was a regular part of ancient human diets. In fact, before the controlled use of fire, all meat was eaten raw. This means that ancient humans had developed a taste for raw meat that modern humans have largely lost. But raw meat is not flavorless. It has a distinct taste that depends on the animal's diet, the freshness of the meat, and the specific cut. Ancient humans appreciated these differences. They chose specific parts of the animal to eat raw and other parts to cook. Let me talk about one more critical technique: meat drying. Dried meat is not just preserved, it is transformed. When you remove water from meat, the flavors concentrate. The texture changes from soft and moist to dense and chewy. The taste becomes more intense. Ancient humans dried meat by hanging it in the sun, near a fire, or in the wind. The process took days or weeks. The result was a portable, long-lasting food that could be carried on long journeys. But the flavor change was equally important. Dried meat tastes different from fresh meat. It is deeper, saltier, more umami. The oldest evidence of dried meat comes from the site of Boxgrove in England, dating to 500,000 years ago. The butchery marks on animal bones at Boxgrove suggest that meat was cut into strips, which is the first step in making dried meat. The people of Boxgrove were not just eating meat fresh, they were processing it for long-term storage and flavor. Now let me step back and think about what all of this means for how ancient humans experienced food. Your ancestors did not experience meals the way you do. They did not sit at a table with a plate full of different components. They did not have a choice between dishes. They ate what they had, but they did not eat it without attention. They paid close attention to the flavor of their food because flavor carried information. Fresh meat tastes different from old meat. Well-fed animals taste different from starving animals. Healthy animals taste different from diseased ones. The flavor of meat told ancient humans whether it was safe to eat, whether it was nutritious, and whether it would provide the energy they needed. This is why flavor was not just pleasure. It was survival. The ability to distinguish good-tasting meat from bad-tasting meat was a survival skill. The people who could tell the difference ate better, got more nutrition, and lived longer. The desire for flavor that you feel today is the same desire that drove your ancestors to develop smoking, salting, fermenting, herbing, and honey glazing. You are not eating because you are hungry. You are eating because the food tastes good. And the reason it tastes good is because your ancestors spent hundreds of thousands of years figuring out how to make it taste that way. Let me bring this back to you. You are standing in a kitchen that is full of seasonings: salt, pepper, paprika, cumin, turmeric, oregano, garlic powder, cayenne, soy sauce, fish sauce, vinegar, lemon juice, dozens of bottles, jars, and packets, each containing a flavor that someone, somewhere, discovered and refined over generations. Your ancestors had none of this, but they had fire, they had fat, they had smoke, they had herbs, they had salt, they had honey, they had time, and they had the desire to make their food taste good. Everything you know about flavor started with someone putting a piece of meat on a fire and noticing that it smelled different. Better, more attractive, more like something worth eating. The spice rack is new. The desire is ancient. You are still cooking with fire. Let me add a cooking method that probably predates even fire. The earth oven. You dig a pit. You line it with stones. You build a fire in the pit and let it burn until the stones are hot. You remove the ashes. You place the meat, wrapped in leaves, on the hot stones. You cover the pit with more leaves, then with earth, and you wait. The meat cooks slowly in the trapped heat. Hours pass. When you open the earth oven, the meat is not just cooked. It is transformed. The slow, moist heat has broken down connective tissues. The fat has rendered through the meat. The leaves have added their own subtle flavors, grassy or earthy or slightly bitter, depending on the plant used. Earth oven cooking is documented across the world. The Polynesian imu, the Hawaiian kalua, the New Zealand hangi, the Mexican barbacoa, the South American curanto. All are variations on the same technique. Heat rocks in a pit, cover with food and more plant material, bury and wait. The earth oven has an advantage over open fire cooking. The temperature is more uniform. The cooking is gentler. The meat does not char on the outside while remaining raw on the inside. And the flavor is more complex because of the leaves, the earth itself, and the slow cooking process. The oldest archaeological evidence of earth oven cooking comes from the site of Gesher Benot Yah, a Kof, in Israel, dating to 790,000 years ago. The excavators found clusters of fire-cracked rocks arranged in a pattern consistent with earth oven use. If this interpretation is correct, then earth oven cooking is nearly 800,000 years old. Now let me talk about a specific part of the animal that ancient humans prized above others. The bone marrow. Bone marrow is the fatty tissue inside the bones. It is rich in fat, flavor, and nutrients. When you crack open a bone and roast the marrow over a fire, it becomes soft, buttery, and intensely savory. The flavor is unlike any other part of the animal. Ancient humans went to impressive lengths to get at bone marrow. At the FK Zinjanthropus site at Olduvai Gorge, dated to 1.8 million years ago, the animal bones show evidence of systematic breakage. The ends of the long bones were smashed open with hammerstones. The marrow cavities were exposed. The evidence is so clear that archaeologists can tell which side of the bone was struck first. This level of effort tells you something. Bone marrow was not just food, it was valued food. It was the kind of food worth the extra work to get. And bone marrow has a flavor that modern people rarely experience. It is rich, fatty, with a mineral undertone that comes from the bone itself. It is one of the most ancient flavors in human cuisine. Let me talk about another overlooked flavor source: the liver. Liver is the most nutrient-dense organ in the animal body. It is rich in iron, vitamin A, and B vitamins. But it also has a distinct flavor: strong, metallic, slightly bitter, deeply savory. Ancient humans ate liver regularly. At the site of Schöningen in Germany, dating to 300,000 years ago, the preserved wooden spears suggest that early humans hunted horses. The horse remains at Schöningen show cut marks consistent with organ removal. The liver was taken. It was eaten. The flavor of liver is an acquired taste. Modern people either love it or hate it. But for ancient humans, there was no choice. Liver was too nutritious to waste. And the strong flavor was not a problem. It was a signal that this food was valuable. Let me now talk about a flavor that has almost disappeared from modern cuisine: the flavor of wild game. The meat you eat comes from domesticated animals, raised on controlled diets. Beef comes from corn-fed cows. Pork comes from grain-fed pigs. Chicken comes from soy-fed birds. The flavor of these meats is consistent, predictable, and relatively mild. The meat that ancient humans ate came from wild animals that lived on wild diets. A wild antelope that grazed on diverse grasses, shrubs, and herbs has a more complex flavor than any domestic animal. The meat carries the flavor of the landscape. It tastes like the plants the animal ate. It tastes like the soil those plants grew in. This is called terroir, a term borrowed from wine tasting, and it applies to meat. An animal that eats wild thyme has meat that tastes of wild thyme. An animal that eats juniper berries has meat with a hint of juniper. An animal that eats bitter herbs has meat that is slightly bitter. Ancient humans experienced this terroir with every meal. The flavor of their meat changed with the seasons and the landscape. In the spring, when animals ate green shoots, the meat was milder. In the fall, when animals ate nuts and berries, the meat was richer. The flavor of the meat was a record of the animal's life. Dr. John Speth at the University of Michigan has written extensively about the flavor preferences of ancient humans. He argues that the desire for variety in flavor was not a luxury. It was a biological adaptation. A diet that is diverse in flavor is also diverse in nutrients. The craving for different flavors drove ancient humans to seek out different foods, different animals, and different cooking methods. This dietary diversity was one of the keys to human success. Now consider the social dimension of flavor. In many ancient human groups, the best parts of the animal were reserved for specific people. The hunter got the choice cuts. The elders got the most tender meat. The children got the marrow. The distribution of flavored meat was a reflection of social relationships. This means that flavor was not just about individual preference. It was about community. The best tasting meat was given to the people who were most valued. This reinforced social bonds and created a shared experience of flavor that bound the group together.